Thank you all for coming back after lunch. Now that you've had your turkey and everyone's ready to, cozy up, I'm going to ask for just a little bit more of your time. Hopefully I'll make it, somewhat interesting talking about the future of Georgia's web platform, right? Woo! Okay. I'm Kendra Skeen. I feel like Nikhil did a much better introduction of me than I would probably do. But I have been here with the Digital Services, Georgia team for a very long time. And my job is basically to help plot out what our future of the web platform looks like. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that. But as Nikhil made a point of mentioning earlier, this is much less about the future of Georgia's web platform and much more about the future of your digital information, right? Because our end goal is less about a web platform technology, and it's much more about you being able to get the information that your constituents need to your constituents, right? And helping you do that and enable that. That's going to start with digital technology, but it's going to end with all of you. So what I want to talk about today is, this is our sort of agenda. We're going to talk about 3 challenges that I know that agencies have as we're thinking about how we serve all of our citizens. And then those challenges, that information is based on data, and it's informed by that user research that we've been talking about. Then I'll tell you some of our goals that we're looking for and how to sort of help you address those challenges moving forward in the future, and then where you come in from there. So challenges to providing government services. We're going to talk sort of broad here, because I want to pick up where Nikhil left off on that challenge of the overwhelm of channels that we're looking at, right? So the citizen connectivity, they can connect through all these different ways, and that can give us a bit of channel fatigue, right? Like there's too many places to choose from. So we know that citizens can be coming to us from a multitude of channels, but while we need to think about those different options, we also know that doesn't mean that the citizens are using all of these channels, right? They can't often choose to use all of them. So while this all started with those traditional means, office visits and phone calls and paper forms, and then, as Nikhil mentioned, we moved to computer, right? And that was a huge opportunity to meet needs while cutting costs, right? We're constantly trying to figure out how do we stop spending so much money on all these things. And so we were able to provide these services and information online. And again, we kept going, right? We have all these different channels that we need to meet. But this can be really a struggle to keep up, right? How am I going to meet everybody in all of these places that they are? And so it's tempting as we hit this overwhelm of digital channels to see if we can prioritize, a couple of them over here on the right. We can cut costs by driving everybody online. And then maybe we just focus right on the places that we're most comfortable. But the challenge that while we need to think about all these options for channels, right, we want to focus on the ones that we're comfortable with, is that that's not necessarily what everybody else can do. Not everybody can get to a computer, not everybody can get to a social media channel to come and interact with us. Our most recent numbers tell us that around 20% of Georgia households do not have access to the internet. 20%. When I learned this, it blew my mind. In fact, DeKalb County Schools tells us that it's closer to 50% of their students do not have internet in their homes. I know some of you were in the room when I heard that number, and I was like, what? DeKalb County, we're not even talking rural, right? We're talking right in our backyard. And so what you're hearing, right, is this is not about whether or not there's broadband in somebody's neighborhood. It's a different issue about access to these digital channels. And that doesn't mean if someone doesn't have internet in their homes that they're using their phone to connect, right? Because a lot of them also don't have a digital plan, right? It comes down to much more about connectivity and less about, whether or not, again, you could have this thing. Articles like this one, written in 2013, actually hit on reasons that have nothing to do with that technology access, and they explain why that percentage is slow to change. So while in Georgia we can brag that 90% of citizens have access to broadband services in their area, that doesn't mean they can afford it in their homes, right? It also doesn't mean that they're all interested in having internet access or using a computer or being connected. So access to internet service is not the same as having internet in the home. And what that means is that a large percentage of Georgians, they're going to come to us through traditional channels in perpetuity, right? We can't just make them go away because it's easier for us to provide services from a computer. And what that means is that while we can drive some people to digital channels, we're still going to need the phone lines. We're going to need paper forms, right? We can't phase them out, and we should probably be thinking more about how to reach these underserved groups that don't have the luxury of a mobile data plan or in-home internet. So our first challenge to providing government information across that broad range is that we can't just focus on providing services to that one channel that we're most comfortable with. We do need to think about how to provide for all of them and understand that different user groups are going to be more comfortable with some and not others. And that brings us to our next challenge, is that information across these channels lives in silos, and a lot of different tiny silos, right? We know we have to provide information for all these channels, but when we start to zoom out, the way that we're getting that information to all these channels gets a little crazy, right? So we have answers to questions per agency, per division, per channel, kind of drilled down in all these different disparate places. And so these are different sources to those answers, or we might call them different sources of truth. The opportunities for error here for citizens to get the right answer gets kind of enormous, right? A policy changes and maybe the person who's handling the phone lines gets it updated in their knowledge base, but the person that needs to update it for the website didn't get wind of it. Or maybe they got it for the website, but the social media person didn't hear about it, right? So suddenly you have different people giving different answers instead of all coming together from that same answer, that same source of truth. So this mess of information that we have means that it's harder for citizens to get the answer that they're looking for. And this really drills down to trust, right? This is one of those reasons why people don't often trust government, because they don't even know if they're going to get the right answer when they call somebody or when they, chat with somebody. So it's a complex challenge with no easy answer, right? Let's be frank. I'm not going to go to the next slide and say, we've got it solved, y'all. But that doesn't mean it's not a question worth thinking about and a problem worth tackling. So we know there's a mess of information, right? But if we really try to go from the crazy, this is the super simple version of what we're dealing with, right? And it looks overwhelming. So if we really simplify it, what are we talking about again, right? We know that on one side, we have a citizen or business that needs information or services. On the other side, we have agencies who are tasked with providing that information and those services. And that brings us to challenge number 3. This is the one I'm going to spend more time on, because what we found when conducting our user research discoveries is that these citizen needs are often directly at odds with what I hear are the agency goals. Right? And so I want to talk about this in detail because I think this is the big part that we all need to be thinking about. So User Insights talked about a little bit of this earlier today, and I'm going to bring it back up. A lot of our findings came around this citizen trust. So we found that citizens trust certain symbols like a state seal. If they saw a website that had the state seal, that told them that it was something trustworthy, and they trusted that above and beyond an agency that had their own personal branding logo. We also found that the common consistent design between Georgia websites gave them that idea that they knew that they could trust those sites because they have that consistent design. As soon as a user would click off to an application or service that same agency delivers that had a different look and feel, they would be like, wait a minute, this looks different. I don't know that I can trust this. Where did I go? I don't think I'm on the right thing anymore. So that consistency really helped with that comfort and that understanding, that trust of yes, I'm in the right place. I know this is a Georgia website, I can trust it. So then on to what they did not trust, right? They did not trust sites with a lot of outdated graphics or banners. On the flip side, they didn't trust sites that had no graphics. So we need some imagery, right? But not, we got to find the right kind of imagery, not just any picture will do. And they also didn't trust sites that were overly polished or flashy, right? Citizens don't want to feel like we're marketing to them when they come looking for a service. They want to know that they can trust us. They want to know that we're official government and that they can get that service. They don't want to feel, again, marketed to. It sort of starts to drop down that level of trust that they have. And I think really what a lot of this speaks to is that they're looking for sort of these symbols or these signs that something is official. Another thing that we found was around the citizen wayfinding, right? So you're going to hear this over and over because citizens do not understand all of our crazy divisions, right? They don't understand it and they don't want to understand it. They don't want to take the time to figure out which agency and which division does what for them. And often they don't even understand the difference between branches or levels of government, state versus local versus federal. It's government, right? Don't you just give me my service when I walk into an office or when I call a phone number. So trying to figure out how we can sort of remove those divides and just help provide those answers more simply. We know that citizens start with Google, right? But what we didn't know is that once they Google something and they get to that first state page, they get to answer for that first question, and they want to answer another question. But if that same website doesn't provide the answer to that other question, now they're stuck, right? They've drilled down to our site, one of the agency sites, and now they can't get the answer to the next question because it turns out there's another division or another agency that answers that. And so that's when they pick up a phone, because now, clearly Georgia doesn't know how to answer this question for me on their websites. So this, I think, was really critical to us to think about, is that we need to be able to sort of space out, sort of interconnect these different websites to be able to provide that information regardless of where somebody lands. Basically, citizens need more continuity between Georgia sites. And I actually want to back up here on the trust. One more thing that we found, and I forgot to put it on a slide, similar to the state seal, and I think User Insights brought it up very briefly, citizens were really looking for that peach, right? And I will tell you, 6 years ago, we had designers that were full on, like, we're getting rid of the peach. What's the peach for Georgia anyways? We don't need a peach. But 6 years later, people are still looking for that peach, right? So this was something that we really, had to think about. Like, this is how people know they're with the state of Georgia, right? Whether or not we like the peach doesn't matter, right? And so really what this all comes down to, like what our research is coming back to over and over, is that to the citizen, all of us are GeorgiaGov, right? The divisions are just confusion. And as User Insights mentioned earlier, when they come to any one of us, they think that really we all just work in one big office, and talk to each other every day. When I call mom, it's the same as calling dad. I talk to Department of Revenue, that's the same as labor, right? They both have department in the name. So how do we connect this, right? We're all one big face for Georgia. So now when I think about what citizens are looking for, right, and I compare those to the conversations that I have with agencies, that all of us have with agencies pretty regularly, what I'm finding though is that a lot of times those citizen needs and those agency goals are at odds with each other. And that poses a real challenge for us, because I'm hearing from agencies that they want to stand out as a unique brand, a unique group, right? And that's in the same breath that citizens want to know their answers without learning about our different silos. I'm finding that our agencies want to break up their information into more sub-sites because it's easier to organize information if we break it up into these smaller sites. But that's why we're hearing from our citizens that they need to just answer all their questions in one place. My agencies want to increase their page views. They want to drive more citizens to be more actively engaged with them and their agencies. They want people to read their press releases. They want to drive more people to their events. I have a question for you. When you go home at night, do you decide to use your free time reading press releases from the other agencies that you're not a part of? I haven't read any of your press releases, guys. Martin's hurt. I'm sorry, man. Right. And so I feel like I'm being a little harsh. I'm not going to start reading your press releases. I'm sorry. But right, because let's be realistic, right, about the role that we play and what we're doing as state agencies. Citizens want to be able to spend as little time as possible interacting with us. True story, right? They want to get back to their lives. How can we help them do that? Right? So instead of talking about how to increase engagement, how to get more page views, how to keep them on our websites more, how does it help us if an agent or if a citizen is on our website longer? It doesn't. That doesn't serve us at all. That's not answering the question that they need. So how can we really turn to how we can reduce friction, provide services, and help citizens get back on their way? So how do I reconcile this, right? One thing that I would recommend that everyone sort of think about when you're thinking about your goals and what you're trying to accomplish is, why are those your goals, right? If increasing page views is your goal, why is it your goal? How is it going to help you meet the needs of your citizens, hit your KPIs and meet the goals for your agency? Are your goals aligned with your citizens' needs? Where should they be more aligned? And where does it make sense to be able to start figuring out how you can start nudging citizens more towards your goals, right? There's definitely places where your goal is to get more people to sign up for the thing that they already are legally required to sign up for, right? So like, yes, absolutely, like revenue, you should nudge more people to pay their taxes. That makes sense. But we don't necessarily need, like, I don't need every citizen showing up to GOVTalks. How's that going to help them, right? We provide a service to a group of people. We don't provide a service to all citizens. So it's not going to behoove us to try to drive more traffic, from citizens that don't have anything to do with us. All right, so our challenges, right? Citizens are looking for information and services in different channels. That information and those services come in different silos, and so they can easily be outdated and really hard to keep track of. And our citizen needs often don't match what our agency goals are. So I told you what we want to do is talk about how we can help you meet those challenges, address those challenges, and so what those turn into are our sort of digital platform goals that we're looking towards building out in the future. So we want to build something that meets your short-term needs, because that, of course, is critical, but also having sort of this broader platform that's more flexible to be able to meet those long-term goals within, like, as a state at the same time. So one of our digital platform goals, big picture, right, is to ease that digital frustration and that silo effect for all of you while also reducing friction for our agencies. A while back, we talked to some of our content managers and asked them to do some focus groups with us and just talk to us about their frustrations, right, the things that they're trying to do to meet their needs that they're not able to do right now. And I do want to take just a minute to talk to you about some of those findings. So, especially for the agencies that have these frustrations, right, I want you to know these are the things that are really high on our list of how we can address them for you in a future platform. So we know that we need robust file management. The biggest frustration for anyone on our platform is how our PDFs sort of are organized and how the many different ways that you can organize those PDFs. And so it can become really difficult to manage. And we know that's a problem because we're not going to suddenly stop needing PDFs here with the state. So it's on the top of our list of things that we want to address in the next platform. We know that people are looking for more flexible layouts than what you have now to be able to organize your information succinctly. Some people are looking for search weighting, right? I have 10 different things that meet this search term, but the most important one is showing up at the bottom instead of at the top. So how do we manually say, like, this is the right form, right? This one's the most important. These are, sort of periphery items. We need more workflow options and user roles for those of you that have a lot of content managers, the larger agencies that want to have different sort of levels of control between who can post and who can publish. We need to make some improvements in our web forms because, forms and information intake is also a big one, that there's a lot of different ways we can tackle that. And then we're looking for more reporting. So when you're creating content and going through your content, more spell checking, broken link checking, being able to sort of find out from that back end, more information about your content to handle it a little bit better. But we also need to find that balance between addressing citizen needs and those agency needs, right? Even when they seem to conflict. And so, while I've got my citizens need common branding across sites and channels, we need to feel like regardless of where we are, whether it's a website or an application or another service that your agency provides, how can we have that common branding while also helping our agencies have that customization so that they are able to do what they want with their custom brand? Because GBI is not the same as human services, right? We do know that there needs to be some variation for different agency types. Each of you want to be able to have sort of your own unique piece, own unique look, but also have that common branding. We know we need to be service-centered because our citizens and our businesses are coming in looking to complete a transaction or get information about receiving a service. But our agencies are more concerned with flexible layouts, so we need to think of how do we do both of those things at once. We want to increase that searchability between sites, so when someone lands on one site from Google, they're able to find the next thing that they need, even if it's from a different agency or a different provider. And we would need to help you improve your management and organization of content, right? So kind of slightly different things we're looking for. And again, big goals improve those connections between channels so that your call center has the same kind of information that your website has, and your social media people know the same information your call center people know, right? We kind of connect all of these and give you an intuitive, streamlined interface to be able to manage that information and that content. So these are the goals that we're thinking about, and I think it's important for all of you to know where we're going, right? And to understand that sometimes there's a balance that requires trade-offs. So we won't be able to give you, a platform where every single page can be laid out like its own separate Word document, and also improve connections and maintain a single source of truth. So we can't do both of those things at once. There's gonna have to be some trade-offs. Because ultimately that vision is building towards single source of truth for your content. This is a big picture goal. Like, this is not going to happen in the next 2 years. But we think that it's worth tackling and starting to see how we can start connecting these things together. We want your citizens to be able to get the right answer regardless of what channel, and we want each of you to be able to manage that information in one place and one time and not have to remember the 12 different places that you have that answer and maintain it, update it 12 different places. Heaven forbid we get a new governor and you've got to change the governor's name through everything, right? So how do we start making this a little bit easier? So our call centers, our websites, our applications, social media, right? All of the pieces. The trade-off to achieving a goal of helping you manage that smart and reliable content is that we can't do it while also building a system that treats each page individually. But so our next big goal is to be able to collaborate more with all of you, because we can't do any of it on our own. We wouldn't want to. That wouldn't give anybody what they need. And then to get each of you as our agency partners to collaborate more with the other agencies that have similar and like needs, so that we can all sort of start coming together as that one GeorgiaGov. So again, to recap, another thing that we're looking for that, Nikhil brought it up, is that we're going to be setting up a digital services of excellence. So groups that we can come together that have similar skill sets, similar interests, and be able to start making sure that what we're building are useful for all of us. We're going to be writing new digital standards, and then we also need beta testers for our new platform build. This isn't going to be immediate, but if we know who's interested in doing beta testing for us, we can start getting those lists together, so let us know. And then over time, we also will want to be able to start piloting projects to solve problems that you have. So if you have a challenge that you need to solve and you don't already have a vendor running off to solve it for you, come talk to us. Maybe there's a way that we can help you solve that through a pilot project. And if it's something that works really well for you, then we can roll it out to more people that could use the same thing. All right, so to recap our goals, right? We want to ease that digital frustration and reduce friction for citizens. We want to build towards that single source of truth and collaborate more with all of you. So let's talk. And while I think it's important for us to all be on that same page, I know that why you came back after lunch is to find out what that means for you right now. What is it that I need to be doing right now to prepare for that future state? This either whether what we need to be able to have in a year from now or even 2 years from now. And so I'm going to spend the rest of my time talking about that little more practical, like what can you be thinking about right now. Nikhil mentioned that we are in those early stages, right? So I don't have any big answers for you, and I can't tell you specific dates, and I can't tell you a lot of concretes, but here's what I can tell you. I can tell you that we're not going to migrate all of your content. Catherine heard that one loud and clear. But I can also tell you that we will migrate your good content, right? Good content is well written, it's well managed. How do we make sure that we have good content, right? What we need to do to make our content good, other than that well written and well managed, is to start chunking it into useful structured pieces of information. So we're not thinking as much about pages as we are about those chunks, those structured pieces of information. That way they will be prepared to be consumed by different channels, right? Instead of just thinking of a page. So even outside of that typical web page layout. So for those of you who were here a year ago, I talked to you about bananas. And for those of you that were not, I think that this bears repeating, right? So not so much about bananas, but about how bananas get from a tree in Honduras to your table. And what I told you is that as recently as 1950s, transport ships would be loaded with a lot of different things, right? Bananas, cattle hides, fish meal, cotton, all unpackaged, all just sort of thrown in piles. They would be loaded in different sacks and boxes and then on and off of ships and trains and trucks, all by hand. right? So if you can imagine the time and effort that that would take for workers to move these bushels and bananas and bales of cotton and unpackaged animal hides, which I just cringe every time I think about, like these animal hides, right? So workers had to package each bag and box individually, and it would take weeks to load off of one ship and onto a truck. So once it reaches that destination, now you have to move it off of the ship in individual train cars. You have to load it from the train cars into these individual trucks and then transport it to its final destination. So we're talking about a lot of manual labor, a lot of time, and I can only imagine those bananas were not that great by the time they made it there after all this handling, right? So this method was pretty inefficient, it was very costly, and for all these goods being shipped, bananas were squashed, bottles of whiskey were broken or swiped by the workers as they, a little extra payment there. So in the 1950s, 30% of a product's price was just in those shipping costs. The time plus the effort, that was a lot of your cost. And then the standardization of shipping containers changed all of that, right? So when shipping containers were standardized so that they were all the same size, and the transportation modes were built to conform to that standard size, suddenly people could move the contents of a container from your truck to your ship, to a train, and to your store, all remarkably quickly. We would not have the affordable goods and services at anywhere near the scale that we do if it weren't for that standardization of our shipping containers. Right, so before containers, 30% of a product's price was in shipping costs. Now it's less than 1%. And I think the lesson for containerization holds the key to how we can all build towards that single source of truth, right? How can we be more effective in our message if we make it more efficient for you to get that message out? You can focus more on the what you're saying instead of where it's going and how you get it there. So getting that content to a calendar, right, or to your map, to a watch, to voice commands, and beyond. So what makes that information easy to ship? Anybody know? Standardization. Structured content is easier to ship. So when our content's standardized, broken up into those discrete chunks of information based on what kind of information it is, it's going to be easier for us to get it wherever it needs to go. From Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, right? But also to all these different devices, to Alexas, to watches, to voice commands or whatever, to texting. What if we just send the answers over text to somebody who doesn't have a data plan and doesn't want to make a phone call? But we have to have that structure in place, right? And that's where content types come in because those help give you the right container for your content. So for example, right, we know it's going to take one container to ship bananas, right? It'll take a different kind of container to ship automobiles or to ship your milk or your oil. Don't mix those two up, right? Different containers for the milk and the oil, or cattle. So we offer different content types for events and blogs and profiles, right, depending on that type of information that we're serving. And that's just to name a few. We can offer different fields then for those discrete pieces of information. So there's a field for a name, and there's a field for a street address, and a field for a city, right? We can start chunking this up and make it easier to port that information anywhere it needs to go. So if you put your events in its appropriate container, we can put that information on the homepage, where every relevant chunk fills a space automatically based on that layout for the homepage. And then that same information can go on a listing page, again, just restructured, reorganized. And then that same information can be laid out differently on the detail page and into your calendar invite all at once, right? So maybe in another iteration that can go to your car or an Amazon Echo. The options are all over the place once we have that base, that structure. Just like how we chunked our popular topics, and that made it easier for that information to show up automatically in Google search results, right? It's chunked in a way that Google just pulls that up as the what you should know. And now we're able to send that same information, the same thing to Alexa. All right, so how do we do that, right? How do I get my content ready to ship wherever we need to go in the future? And this is something that you can start doing now even though we won't be ready to help ship it somewhere for a year. But you're going to have that structure in place so that we know it's good content, we know it's solid, and we can automate the migration of that type of content over. So the one thing I would say is if you care about your content, chunk it. And I'm going to talk more about that. You want to structure your files, and anything you don't need, delete. So this is ways that you can standardize that content. So if you want to future-proof your content, the biggest thing is to chunk it. And that means the right content type for the type of content. So locations go in a location content item instead of a site page, for example, for those of you on the platform. But that also means chunking your important site pages and files too, even the ones that they're site page information, that's where it belongs. And then you want to make sure that information is well written, well organized. So in early December, something we're going to be rolling out is a new report that you can access from the back end for those of you that use our platform that's going to list the top 100 most viewed content items. Right now we have the 100 least viewed content items. We will then also have the 100 most viewed. And that's going to be a really easy way for you to go in and see what's the most important key content that people are coming to, so you can think about how to focus on that, right? Nikhil talked about the 80-20 rule. How do we focus on the most important content and make sure that's well written and well chunked out? And so the problem with site pages, right, because most of anyone on the platform, most of your pages are site pages, they have a lot of options for how you can structure into chunks of information, right? There's the title and the summary and the body, but then there's also a structured image, so you can have sort of that key image. You can have a list of related links, and you can structure out your related files. Each one has a field, so you can name it and make sure that Drupal knows that that file is in there. But even though we have all of those options, and I want to figure out how to do my little thingy. There it is. See, all my little options, right? But we don't use them, right? What we do is we just put our big blobs of information in the WYSIWYG field instead. So I could put my links, the related links, but instead I put them here. And I know why you do that, right? It's because you need that header. And you can't have that header on a site page if you just use the related links. Same with related files, right? People want more control over the order of their content. And so we sort of bypass all the structure and we go right to our big WYSIWYG field. But these are your truckloads of unpackaged bananas, right? This isn't going to be easy to ship anywhere, and Google's not going to know what to do with it. So for those long dumps of mixed content, what I'd recommend is that you move them out of that WYSIWYG field and into our newer content type, which is the columns. We rolled out columns about a year ago to help you chunk that information and add structure to all that information that you want to be able to control a little bit more. So the columns is up above. I would say don't keep both, right? Get rid of your WYSIWYG part and just put everything into your chunks. This is going to take a little bit more time, but it helps you separate all of those different pieces. You can even then lay out that information in more than one column. So any of you using tables to just have information horizontal across the page, if you have a table that's not for tabular data, it should not be in a table. Like if it's tabular data, absolutely, those should be tables every time. If it's not tabular data, pull it out of your WYSIWYG field and pull it into a column layout and break it up that way. Those are going to be responsive. They're going to stack however they need to based on the device. So with columns, each area of your content grouping can contain a different type of chunk content, right? So you can have your list of related links, and you can have multiple chunks of related links on the page. The same with images. Instead of having a body field that you put an image into, if you put it into the image field, we're going to have a better relation to for Drupal to be able to understand this is an image, and here's how I need to move the image. And it'll also make it more responsive. So it can be larger on a large screen, smaller on a small screen. We have video, the same thing. It's going to be responsive video that's specific anywhere on the page. And then our related files. This is the one that, it's the part I really worry about when we talk about migrating, all right? Because everyone has more files than they have anything else, and most of them right now are not structured. I need you to structure the files you want to keep. I really do. All right, and what do I mean by that? Structure the files you want to keep. All right, so here's the back end, a page on a back end that's just in the WYSIWYG field, your body field. We've got some links up at the top, and then we have a heading for general, and then we've got some links to some files, and somebody uploaded those files and linked them right here in the back end. And then there's another heading, and there's another link, to a file. This is the unstructured piles of bananas. And here's how it looks on the published page, right? We've got our subheadings. That's why they're organized that way, right? I totally understand why they're that way. But what I can do with these is take them out of just that generic body field, and I can put them into a related file chunk under columns. And I can upload each one and give it a title, and it's already going to say what the size is for me and everything. And then I can do that for this whole section, so I can have a special heading. I can say that it's a heading 2, or I can say it's a heading 3 or heading 4, so we can really structure and control each of those pieces of content. And I can do the same for my image, and my links up here at the top. And so here's what that page looked like before it was structured. Here's what it looks like after it's structured. It's not that much different. We're still accomplishing the same things. But not only now does Drupal know what to do with each of these pieces of content when it's time to migrate, but we also have a little bit better layout. So where this wrapped up before, because it was all just in a big blob, now we can actually chunk it and divide by sections. Right, so that is that. Same information, just now it's structured. Again, this takes time, I understand that, and that's why I say start with that top 100, right? And you've got a year. You have time to start just sort of thinking about what you want to structure and what you don't really need anyways, so you can delete it. Because that's the next one, right? Those things that you don't want to structure, and you don't want to structure them because nobody looks at it anyways, because we just put it up there because somebody wanted us to, and we see from analytics that it's not used. You can delete those. Now, Nikhil was talking about the 80-20 rule. And one thing that I kind of want to come back to on there is that the 80-20 rule does not mean keep 20% of your content and delete the other 80% that isn't as popular. Right? We know that we have content that only 100 people in all of Georgia need, but 100 people in all of Georgia need that content. Right? That doesn't mean it's not important. But it means that maybe you don't need to prioritize it quite the same as the content that 1 million people need. Right? So it's sort of looking at those differences. It's focusing the most on the key content, the most important, and then it's focusing a little less on that space in the middle. And then it's finding the ones that absolutely nobody has accessed in 6 months, and also there is no legislative reason why it has to be there, and those you can delete or archive, right? But that way, when it comes migration time, you don't have to then all of a sudden in a few weeks' time decide what to do with every single piece of content that wasn't in that top 100 list, right? You can start thinking about it over time. So keep up with a quarterly or more regular content audit, right? If you regularly archive that content, you won't have to think about it later. And this is where I mentioned before, we do have, when you log into the back end on our platform, you go to Site Reports, there's a least viewed link. Jenna put this together. This is one of her brilliant aside ideas a year ago. And it was because one of our content managers opened a ticket and said, hey, I have a problem. And she's like, I think I know how we can solve that. Right? So we listen to everything you bring up to us. So she can give you a list, you can get a list of the 100 least viewed pages on your site. Now, I know some sites have less than 100 pages, and that's awesome because you get your whole list right there, and you can see your most viewed and your least viewed all at once. But for other sites, you're going to have a list of 100 pages that nobody's looked at in 31 days. And you can think about those pieces of information and say, well, this first 8 we don't need. I think they've been on the least viewed page forever, and no one looks at it. And then there's going to be other pieces that you say, well, how come no one's viewing this? We get phone calls about it all the time, right? And when you have those things that show up on your least viewed list, you can look at it and think, well, what are people searching for? Am I using the right words, right? Are people searching for this, but I don't have the right phrase in this piece of content that I need people looking at? So you can start thinking about how to tune and redo the things that are least viewed but are important, and then how to get rid of, the ones that are least viewed and nobody needs it. I got one more for you. This one's a bonus. It's a freebie, right? So you can be planning for your future at the same time, right? We've hit on all the things you can do to prepare for your content migration. But we're also going to continue preaching to your leadership that one of the most important things for them to be thinking about in the future staying relevant to this changing digital landscape is to have mature content managers and content strategists who can really think about this content beyond the scope of the web and be able to really tune and understand what the content is and how it can meet citizens' needs. So who better to be those mature content strategists that can help the agency move forward than all of you, right? You're our best bet. We don't want to tell them, hey, fire everybody and hire brand new people. No, we want you to be those mature content strategists that we can say, hey, you guys need to be thinking about this. Also, we know this person at your agency is really great at it, right? And for that exact purpose, we developed a content strategy certification series. So we have 6 classes. We talked about it a little bit earlier. We've been offering it about once every 6 months. We're going to start, as long as we have the demand, we're going to step it up a little bit more. This content series is designed to help you level up and understand more of that big picture content strategy, right? So knowing that we're building towards this idea of more structured content and understand that information, we put all this together. So you'll be able to develop personas for your agencies, map your customer's journey, how to write for the web so that content is good, easy to understand content, analyze your analytics, and know how to tune what you're saying towards what they're looking for. How to create accessible content, because it's important to be compliant, and also perform content audits. That's the part where you figure out what to delete and what to revise. All right, so again, recap, here's what you can be doing now is you can be chunking the part that's important, specifically structuring those critical files, because there are so many of them, and then delete the stuff that you don't need, right? And then if you haven't already attended one of our content strategy series courses, sign up. I think we're supposed to be asking John. John's over there. He's the one that'll get you signed up. Nah. All right, so we're a year out from migrating anyone to a new platform, but you can start planning for it now. Right, this future vision for a unified content repository, it's super ambitious and it's not going to happen overnight. What we need is for all of you to help us build towards that unified GeorgiaGov, right? We'll be communicating all of this more in detail as we get further down this path. And the one last thing that I want to bring up is that if you need us to talk to your leadership teams about any of this to help you get the support that you need, come to Nick Hill or I afterwards and we can talk about that too. Because again, we're looking to support each other. So if you let us know where you need help, we can help you as well. So thank you.